So I'm used to have research field language, I'm funded by the EA.
I'm Irene. I've been teaching EAL, which is English as an Additional Language, for about 13 years, 12 in London. And over the years, I've come across a fair number of unaccompanied young people. So I'll just briefly share my experience of working with them and give you an idea of what they're likely to encounter in the educational system. So the first thing that really jumps out is how emotionally needy they are. And it's just, I think unless you've really got to know some really well, it's quite staggering what they're lacking in terms of family support structure. You know, we all, even if we don't like our families or whatever, we still have them there and we take them for granted. But these kids, they're just missing that whole foundation. And then because of that, it's really, really important for them to have as much stability as possible. And school kind of becomes home away from home, and it kind of becomes family in some ways. And kids spend a lot of time in school. It's 6 hours every day for 5 days, so it's 30 hours. Sometimes, you know, at home they might be on their phone or something. In school they're actually interacting a lot more. So it's really, really important if one's joining to have things in place before they start, I think, because I think it would be actually quite cruel to just have them rock up and just kind of follow somebody else and fend for themselves, because they really need somebody to talk to. They really need like a key person that they can go to and discuss their issues with, or even just, you know, get help with English, because a lot of them obviously come with no English, and there's a real range. Some come with pretty good literacy and quite good previous education, although it may be interrupted, but some have no education and absolutely no literacy and can't write their name. So, you know, there's quite a range, and for the low literacy ones, the learning curve is that much steeper. So they really need to be looked after on the emotional side of it. And in addition to that, they have a lot of other upheavals in their life. So things like social workers changing, you know, every 5 minutes, the home office interviews and all that sort of thing. It's incredibly, incredibly stressful. And I think, you know, we all have stress in our life, but immigration stress is like on another level. And it's really having the rug pulled up from under you to such an extent, and it's really hard to care about anything when you're having stress like that in your life. So it is really important for schools to be mindful of that. So having said that, as far as the educational provision that they're likely to encounter is, they'll still go to probably will go to mostly mainstream lessons, and they'll be expected to do the work, you know, that everyone else is doing. But they're likely to be looked after by the EAL staff, if the school has that. But there's no prescribed method of doing this, because every school is different, and there's not, schools have like policies for everything. There's like a, you know, assessment policy, this policy, that policy. I've never come across an unaccompanied child policy. Not to say that there isn't one out there, but in my 13 years, I've never heard one. So there's good practice that Ofsted recommends, and there's a thing called New Arrivals Excellence Program. So it's sort of like, you know, buddy them up with somebody who speaks their own language, make sure they're settled, you know, make their timetable up properly, you know, put support in place, things like that. But the way that it's manifested is different. So there's a real range. I mean, some schools have big EAL departments and a range of specialist teachers and teaching assistants that go into the lessons. Some schools don't have the resources quite so much, and then, you know, it'll be just slightly less than that. Some local authorities have advisory teachers that go into, so they'll have the same person going into different schools and doing a couple hours here, a couple hours there. It just depends. I mean, so I've heard of some schools just tacking on this sort of, right, you're responsible for EAL now, and it'll be somebody with, you know, teaching full-time French. You know, it just depends. There's a real range. Generally speaking, I'd say probably the average, they'll get a couple additional support lessons, and they might have some teaching assistants helping them in some of their wordier lessons. They might get some special needs support depending on what the situation is, but it's quite difficult assessing for special needs, because there's an assumption that it's just, they don't have the language, they haven't got the English, so that's their special need. So I've found it in certain times quite difficult, you know, when I know there's some things, you know, when we've been hammering the same thing for sort of 6 months and I'm still told, well, they just don't know their alphabet. And it's like, well, okay, but they should have known it by now, surely. So but it's difficult, but I have had some success with that as well. I'd say a lot depends on how well the SEN and EL staff know each other and work well together. And I think that's generally the theme, is when people cooperate and care and work together well, things go well. So they might get some special needs support. In exams, because a lot of these kids come in Key Stage 4, which is year 10, year 11. And Key Stage 4 is all exam. So in exams, if they've been in the country less than 2 years, they will get exam access arrangements, which is 25% extra time and use of bilingual dictionary. And in some cases, if you can prove that it's their normal way of working, they may be able to get a reader or a scribe. So if it's a child with very, very low literacy, they might get somebody to read the exam paper for them. And if they're really lucky, they might be able to say the answer and they'll write it down for them. But that's few and far between in my experience. So it can be a bit of a struggle. So the deciding factors for this range of provision is probably how diverse the student body is. So if a school's used to kids joining from overseas, they're likely to have something put in place. A lot depends obviously on the budget and the priorities of the senior leadership team. I mean, a lot of it is about exams, unfortunately. So the kids that have been here less than 2 years, their exam results can be excluded from the overall school average, which is nice in a way because then there isn't a reason to not accept them into the school. But at the same time, they don't help the leagues tables. So, why? Depending on the decisions that are made, it's not necessarily glamorous to spend a lot of money on kids that don't help the leagues tables. But having said that, there are a lot of really caring people in education, and we do really try. I'd say, so the other thing they do get is pupil premium money. So there are things that do ensure that they progress. They do get pupil premium money. There isn't a prescribed way of spending it. So some schools put it in sort of one big giant pot, and then individual teachers come and request things, and then you usually get it. But if it's not too extravagant, and other schools allocate it to the individual pupils, and they might use it on whatever they like, that, and on study support, staffing, anything down to uniform and books and things. They'll be on the safeguarding register probably because if they're looked after, that's a well-known vulnerable group, so they will be flagged up in that way. I'd say the biggest barrier that I've encountered is with the exams, because if they don't count on the results, then they're unlikely to, if they've joined in year 10 or year 11, they're unlikely to pass things like GCSE English and GCSE Maths, and that is the absolute marker of success, so for further education. So we spend a lot of time working on things like Wilfred Owen poems and the Shakespeare's use of language, whereas we could have been doing an ESOL course instead. So, but it's if we did that, it would be denying them equal access to education. So it's a well-meaning thing, but everyone's entitled to equal access to the curriculum. However, I think in some ways it can work against them and actually deny opportunity, I think. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much.